Hi, everyone. Hi. Okay, so yeah, I know there's a lot more people online than there are physically, so hello to all of you. But I'm also glad that there are people here physically. When Corona hit and I had to do a university lecture the first time to Zoom and there's no physical audience, that was the most challenging experience ever. So I'm at least happy for the mix, but also really happy about the fact that we can now, reach a lot more people and share ideas with a much wider audience because we know how to work in this hybrid world. So look at society using technology to adapt. So today I will talk about some tech and innovation trends that I and my colleagues in KMD CTO office really believe are key to the next few years. And I'll try to cover, I think, a bit of background of how we came to these conclusions and the trends at a high level. I won't dive so much into the specific technologies, but I can say that we in KMD Group in the CTO office will like to do a lot more kind of following communication about specific technologies and trends in more detail in the coming times. So first, yes, it does work. So just a little bit about me. I don't have a link to LinkedIn or anything on here, but you're welcome to add me on LinkedIn. My name is quite unique, so you'll find me if you want. But the reason why this one is here is to talk a little bit about my background, because I think that shapes a lot of how I think about technology and the way that it impacts the world. So of course, right now, I'm very, very happy and proud to be part of the KMD group and part of KMD's top management team. And I think my role there, of course, is to think about technology strategy, especially where do we believe the world is going and how do we prepare ourselves for that? But also this understanding of technology and how it needs to also impact business strategy, which of course is also quite important. And I've been at KMD for 2.5 years now. And before KMD, I spent almost 10 years in the video game industry. So I worked for a company called Unity. When I joined it, it was a startup. It's not that anymore. But that was quite a different industry, right? So, and Unity was a very innovative, market-leading, like actually a very, very market-disrupting company for the industry that it was part of, right? So it was a very different type of company than KMD is. KMD, we have half a century of history behind us, and it's because of the work that we have done that, as Derek mentioned, is Denmark has the most digitalized public sector in the world. So these are quite different experiences. And before Unity, I've worked in a few places, but I actually worked for a while for a company that made scientific research equipment. And so I did a lot of embedded software development there. And as part of that, I worked with NASA. So KMD is actually also not my first experience working in these very highly regulated sectors, right? So these are all very, very different experiences. And the reason why I mention all of this is because I've come to very much a conclusion that the coolest thing about technology is that you have the ability to impact the world by the way that you use it. But also that I believe that companies should exist for a reason. They should exist to solve problems in the world or to make the world better. And that we need to understand from a technological perspective, how is our use of technology like achieving that purpose? And my education, I don't have a business education. I have a technical education, and my career started as a developer, right? So I totally understand the fascination with the technology itself and understanding how it works and how to use it, right? But I think from a maturity perspective, and if you want to have the biggest impact that you can on the world, it's important to understand, first and foremost, how actually can you use the technology to achieve like the purpose that you want, right? So this kind of, you could say it's a customer-centric, it's a human-centric, it's a market-centric approach to understanding technology and what's happening in the world is really, really important. And I think whenever you think about a company like the KMD Group as well, our biggest asset is actually our domain knowledge, this history that we have in understanding the markets, the world that we work in, and understanding our customers, right? So it's important to understand technology in that context. So I'll start out by putting up a picture of what we in the KMD CTO office call the KMD Technology and Innovation Map. And I want to spend a bit of time talking about kind of how we came to these conclusions, because it's very much in line with what I talked about in terms of my own personal philosophy, right? I mentioned that I didn't go to business school. Luckily, I'm happy to have people in my team who did. That can also bring this very market-centric view also on how we should drive both technology exploration, but also an innovation strategy to KMD and our customers. So we actually started by first wanting to understand what is the technology landscape in a KMD context. So what we have is a mapping of technologies based on both maturity level. So you could say in a KMD context, the technologies are more mature, more well understood, the closer they are to the center of the circle. And then the further out, they become a bit more conceptual, so they're maybe less mature, especially from in a KMD context. So we worked very hard to understand technologies from two perspectives. One being how well does the KMD group understand this technology? What is our experience with it? What is our maturity level? But also, what is the understanding of this technology from a customer and market perspective? And that's extremely relevant because we work in a number of industries that are very, very highly regulated. So most things pretty much all solution areas in KMD you can think of kind of fall into digital government, so working with the digitalization of municipalities or central government, or within kind of climate and energy and utility, or within FSI, digital banking, right? These are all very highly regulated industries. And although there's a lot of technological development happening in them, in a lot of areas, there's also very slow moving whenever it comes to adopting new technologies. So it's important that we don't understand technology from a pure technological standpoint, but that we understand it also from the perspective of our customers and how they see that technology. And most importantly, how ready are they to adopt it in a solution that we deliver them, or we deliver to them. So the CTO office led a very long and quite in-depth process of understanding actually a lot of work with a number of different business specialists across the entire group that work in these different sectors. And then also, of course, the technology leaders across the group as well that have experience with specific technologies and solutions in these different sectors. And there was a long process to understand what are the kind of the common patterns and what are the common insights that we came with. And the purpose was to try to understand what do we think is happening in the world with the customers that we deliver to that we think will impact how we should think about and focus and prioritize our work with technology for the next period of time. And so through all of that, we came up with 5 trends that I'll talk a little bit more about one by one. I think it's important to understand that this customer and user-centric understanding of technology is the reason why we would take a technology and put it perhaps in a different maturity level than you would see if you took the same technology and looked at where it was on the Gartner hype cycle, for example. The 5 trends, of course, that we come up with are the multi-cloud future. That's one that I focus on right now with a very high sense of urgency. I'll talk a bit more about that towards the end. Open standards, user empowerment, data spaces, and enhanced decision support. Yeah? So if we spend a little bit of time on the first trend, open standards. So from a kind of a definition perspective, open standards are standards made available to the general public. And you can say that they tend to be developed or at least approved, regulated, and maintained by some kind of collaborative or consensus-driven process. There's often organizations that are established to govern them, for example. And the reason why I think they're important is because they basically are a way to facilitate communication, the exchange of data, and cooperation between different software systems. I think they're important from a technological standpoint because they can allow us to, you could say, future-proof solutions so that we can build upon them rather than have to re-platform them constantly. And then that's also quite important from, you could say, a business future-proofing perspective as well. So, I mean, driving openness in the implementation of our solutions, I see that as something that needs to be part of our day-to-day decision-making whenever we work in development organizations across KMD and in general. And this means really trying to develop, build, and architect our solutions in a way that we can build on top of them, that we can reuse, we can replace components. And whenever this can be done by following officially established open standards, then obviously I think that that's the better, because it establishes that our solutions are built in a way that they can be expanded within a context that's not only our own. So overall, it's a way to, I would say, kind of increase, of course, the ease of internal collaboration, but also improve maintenance burden, and is also a way to drive openness, towards your customers and towards your users as well. Create something that they can actually collaborate with you. People who know me know that I'm also actually quite a big fan of open source. I have a very, very strong Linux background. I have experience establishing open source projects and contributing to a number of them. I think that this is actually something as well that companies, even companies that make proprietary software solutions, need to understand and also embrace, because the core value add that you deliver as an organization, and it's very much true, I think, for KMD, is how to use technology and create solutions with the domain knowledge that you have in the context of your customers. So that means that you shouldn't be afraid, I think, of open source. And it's also something I think that as Europeans we have to be prepared for as well, because there's a strong trend within the European government and pushing this agenda as well, right? So it's one of those things where I think you can sort of be proactive and actually help drive the agenda, or you could be forced to follow along. And I think it's always much better to be in the first category. So from a technical perspective, what would I say personally that I believe that open standards really mean from a more architectural standpoint? So I think it's about modularization of solutions, shifting towards modular component architecture. I'm a big fan of, I was a big fan of a microservice architecture before we kind of got into the modern microservice theater that we have now is maybe a little bit too far, but I think in general, modular component architecture is really, really important so that you can actually replace and modernize components of a solution without needing to replatform the entire thing. Then I think open source is a really, really important element of it as well. Of course, most companies use open source components in one way or another. It's pretty hard not to. I think you should also be willing as well to contribute and even publish open source components as part of your development life cycle. And then I think, you know, on the other side of that's key to scalability of your solutions. It's key to reusability of your solutions, future-proofing your solutions in your business. And then I think also whenever you work with openness in this way, it's also a way to be very open in collaboration with your customers. So, you know, from an innovation perspective, this is a way to create the possibility to innovate, I think, much faster, much more openly together with your customers, and actually have much faster, a much shorter life cycle of actually trying out new proof of concepts to see if that actually works in a particular technical domain. So I think in general, open standards is something that should govern the technical decisions that we take day to day. In the CTO office, we have a particular interest in the Fireware technology, which is a big focus area also for our parent company, NEC. And one of the reasons why I think that this is interesting is because that it's actually a means to deliver both on an open standards agenda, depending on what kind of data you put into it, and also the data spaces agenda. But I think it's the way that we can use technology to connect people even across society, collaborating between companies and companies and customers is a really, really powerful way to drive kind of the next generation of the digitalization of the society that we work in. I mentioned in general open source. It's very dear to my heart. If you have no experience with it, you know, just look up the open source initiative. There's all kinds of things that you can find out there. So it's just I wouldn't say that's a product placement, but it's something to get you thinking. To think a bit about user empowerment. So user empowerment, this is the next trend. So this is really about giving users power and control of their environments, right? I think in the context of the solutions that we deliver in KMD, it's especially about allowing our customers and our users to configure and customize their solutions as much as possible, preferably without having heavy technical knowledge, because let's face it, most of our customers don't have heavy technical knowledge. And it's about exploration and understanding of how to interact with software and technology systems in different and more innovative ways. And this is, I think, especially important from an accessibility angle. Three interesting things here, right? So when you think about user empowerment, one of the things that's happening in the world right now, we definitely see it, of course, in Denmark, is that we have what we call a growing elder population. So we're in this kind of weird transition stage, you could say, where we have a very large, so a disproportionately large part of the population is aging, and it's not an inherently digital population. So it's not a, you know, the generation that I'm from is kind of the last generation that kind of distinctly remembers before the digital age, and we saw through the transition, but I've lived a huge proportion of my life in that world, right? But we have this growing elder population that is not an inherently digital population, but needs to live in this digital world, right? I think we take a lot of things for granted about what people have and how they understand how to interact with solutions and with technology in general. We see this, for example, in Denmark, where we have a national identification system, and we have just switched over to the next generation of this, and it has, you know, there has been an assumption that everyone has a smartphone, and that's a fairly safe but not completely safe assumption. And the oldest population in Denmark has actually been the one that have struggled a lot with this transition, right? Because it's not something that we have, admittedly, as a society, that we have probably thought enough about. But we need to be aware that, life expectancy is increasing, and this population is here and will be for some time, but also that technology changes so fast, It's hard for me to think about the fact that my kids, they will never know a world before an iPhone. They will never know a world before a smartphone, right? And just think, how will it be in 10 years and 20 years, right? So we always need to consider the fact that the digital age changes so fast now, right? That there's quite a range when you consider how long people live today that we need to be able to cater for. And there's also a huge impact as well in terms of the globalization of society. So, of course, the internet changed everything about how we communicate with one another and the exposure that we have to other cultures and languages, but also just in terms of accessibility, from being able to cater to people with different cultural backgrounds, but especially language, I think is a key thing as well. And then I think both from a customer expectations perspective, in terms of how we think about empowering our customers to be able to configure their solutions. They want to be able to do more themselves. They don't want to have to come back to us or to any other software vendor and have us do all of the work for configuring and customizing solutions as they change. And I think from a business perspective as well, when you work in the industries that we do, where you need to deliver very large solutions and there's a high customer implementation cost, it's also good business to think about user empowerment in the context of allowing users to actually configure solutions themselves. The next trend we'll talk a bit about is the data spaces trend. So data spaces are an abstraction in data management that aim to overcome some of these problems that are traditionally encountered in data integration systems. So the aim here, right, is to try to reduce the effort that's required to set up a data integration system by relying on existing matching and mapping of data generation techniques and to improve the system as it is used. So the idea is that you basically create a standardization around how you store, how you share, how you expose data, but you actually implement how you do this as it's needed, right? So you could think of this actually as sort of the context of open standards, but in the context of data. But given the amount of data that we have in the world, and especially the digitalization of society, and the amount of data that's stored just in general, if you look in the energy and utility sector, for example, we face a very different world than we did in the past, where from meter perspective, it used to be that in order to pay your utility bill, there was somebody that came out to your house once a month and wrote down, okay, this is what the meter says. Now, now we have data that's being stored automatically, like every 15 minutes. How do we handle and actually share and store and use this data? And we have it just all over the place as well with the Internet of Things, and we have sensors, and we have the possibility of digital twins and smart cities. We need to have a common approach to how we manage this, and we actually have this as a focus in the European context, right? So there is, of course, a European strategy for data, and this is a focus that the European Union has on creating a common European data space, a single market for data, and they have a few different industries where they have a particular focus and expectations around on where this should happen. And the idea here is that the common European data spaces need to bring together the relevant data infrastructures and governance frameworks in order to facilitate data pooling and sharing across European countries. And it's meant to deploy data sharing tools and services for this purpose, and allow us to actually federate energy efficient and trustworthy cloud capabilities as well. So if you're like very interested in the evolution of how we do cloud computing in an open European concept, the European strategy for data is actually a very relevant thing there. This is also, expected to kind of include data governance structures. So this connects how we govern data in a European context to European legislation. And in general, this is a means to actually improve the availability, the quality, and the interoperability of data between different, within a given country, but also across the entire European Union. So this is another thing where I think this is an agenda that you either have to be part of, or you would be made to be part of it at some point. And just like the open source thing, I think it's much better to proactively be part of it rather than be made to be part of it. And this is a particularly interesting and exciting one from my personal perspective, because in KMD we have the advantage due to our positioning in the Danish market, and also given how much digitalization we have in the Danish society, to actually be a driver on the open data agenda in the Danish public sector. And I think it set an example for the rest of Europe. And the way that we have already, the first parts of this within a Danish context, I think, we're very well positioned as a company because of our size and our history to take a proactive approach to this dialogue. And if we're very smart about how we do this, then I think, we enable a lot of things. We enable faster and easier innovation in a data-based context. This, we can actually find opportunities to enable AI and machine learning in a number of solution areas that we already work in. And this is all just more like value addition, right? To using technology to make better solutions and create more of a positive difference in the world. So, you could talk about the context of a Danish data space and what role do we play in that. You can also talk about the context of just the KMD data space and even how do we internally learn how to lean into that in a much more efficient way than we have in the past, using all of the learnings that we have now. Yes. We'll talk a bit about enhanced decision support, the next trend. No, just check where I'm doing. Okay, I'm okay on time. So enhanced decision support, you could say this is basically, you could say it's about AI and machine learning, but I think in general, you need to think of it in the context of this is about how we use and develop technology to allow our users and society in general to make better decisions, right? So in a KMD context, this for us is heavily about how do we use AI and machine learning into our solutions. And I find this very, very interesting from a strategic perspective, because there are all kinds of opportunities you can use technology to help make more fair, efficient, and more accurate decisions. So a lot of people are, have been kind of afraid in a number of ways about AI and machine learning and what does it mean, and do I trust a computer to make decisions about X, Y, Z? And then, of course, that has pushed towards a lot of dialogues around, okay, but what about white box AI? How do we make sure that AI is explainable so that we can understand it and we understand how it comes to the conclusion that it does? And I think all of that is really, really good. And I think also it's important to understand the conversation that's being had here also at the European level, because there are regulations that are coming around how we can and cannot use AI in software solutions. And especially whenever the decision, you could say that the decision that is being made is something that has a significant potential impact on people's lives, of course, then there's a higher risk if it's not implemented correctly. But I think all of that's actually fine and very fair, but I think it's important to understand and think, and much more exciting to think about the opportunities that are created through this, right? We have the ability to actually secure that people are being treated fairly, that a decision that is being made about you, opportunities that you're being given, is not based on the mood of the caseworker that you have handling your case, but on a number, or at least is guided by a number of objective factors. I think whenever you think about, the sort of historical inequalities that we have seen in society, I mean, I'm really, really excited about the ability that we can actually have to impact how people are treated in a much more positive and much more fair way through this. And there's just a number of different, no matter which kind of technological domain you work in, there are opportunities here, right? So if you work in the financial sector, you can think about one of the things on the map is anomaly detection. Well, that means a number of different things, but in the financial sector, you can think of that in the context of fraud detection. Automated case handling, I mentioned, for fair case handling and decisions. Then if you think about energy and utility, being actually able to lean into, I don't know if we can, I guess we can't solve the climate crisis. Probably the ship has sailed on that, but we can at least try to be as proactive as we can about correcting course. And I think technology and using technology to drive that is a key opportunity that we have as creators of these systems. And then I think it's important to think about that, when we're talking about AI and machine learning and enhanced decision support, the human aspect of this is really, really important, right? And I think that it's also kind of the counterpart to what many people are afraid of whenever they think about AI and AI-based decisions, right? That there will be some robot that's deciding something about them, and they can't, they don't understand like how they're being treated. They don't feel like they're being treated like a person. They feel like there's some automated decision that is just being made about them, and they're not being treated like a human. And we need to make sure that we keep the human aspect at the core of this as we figure out how to lead into and drive this technological trend. So I think that's also why it's important to understand that we're pretty far away, I think, from purely automated decision-making processes. That's just how it is, right? But it's about using automation to guide decisions that at the end of the day are still ultimately human decisions. So that's why it's also enhanced decision support, not automated decision-making. This is very, very important, I think, both for us to be able to morally do the right thing, so implementing AI and machine learning in a way that we actually are having a positive impact on the users and the world around us. Also, it's necessary, I think, for us to be able to respond correctly to the European regulations that require that we can show that, these AI systems are not making biased decisions, and that we are treating people fairly, etc. All right. Then the last trend, and I put this up here just to start talking about the multi-cloud future. So this one, I choose to end with this one because I actually think, given the audience of this conference, this one is probably the most controversial because this, in my mind, is hand-to-hand with cloud agnosticity, which for people who are really excited about cloud technologies is often, not always, but often something that they're not a fan of. But if we just think about the concept of like the multi-cloud future. So what does that mean? Some people, like, they equate multi-cloud future with cloud agnosticity. I believe that one, if you're being responsible, kind of implies the other. However, they're not hand-to-hand. So you can say, I've heard people say, I don't believe in multi-cloud. Well, that's kind of like saying you don't believe in gravity. Like, this is the reality that we live in. So just to give some key examples, right? So we have public cloud. In KMD, of course, we're very big into Asia. We're very proud of being a first mover into a public cloud with a lot of our public sector solutions. But most people know the big three, the other ones being Amazon and Google. You have private cloud. So there are kind of private cloud vendors. Take examples that we use or look into, Hetzner and Base Farm. But private cloud, you can also think of that as on-prem. So if you work in sectors that we do, you still have some customers that want to run solutions actually in their own on their own servers in their own basement. That's kind of the concept of private cloud. Hybrid cloud, of course, having components in both, or a way to utilize private cloud together with public cloud. Like these exist, so you can't say that you don't believe in multi-cloud, because this is the world that we live in. What you could say is that you don't believe in cloud agnosticity. But I have a couple of reasons that I think is relevant for talking about why you should, or at least it should be a part of your technical decision-making process, and what the trade-offs are. So there are two. One, I will say, is I put GDPR on here because it's something that everyone knows. Although I will go out on a limb and say that GDPR legislation, I think, is one of the most miscommonly understood things that we have as a common dialogue in society today, and also surprisingly misunderstood by very technical people, actually. But there are a lot of regulations here that we're still trying to understand what they actually mean in a technical context. But it's not only about GDPR and data privacy, right? It's also about all of the other regulatory legislation that we have that governs, you know, what you need to understand about the cloud vendors that you use, what they can and cannot do, what are they doing with the data, are you owning the data, is your customer owning the data, where is it going, who has access to it. This is all stuff that you have a responsibility to understand if you're developing and delivering a solution. And we live still in quite a gray zone, and I think we will for quite a long period of time, because we don't understand very clearly what a lot of these regulations mean in a technical context. So to give an example, you know, there's a fairly big difference in terms of actual risk in the scenario of, you know, you running a solution in a cloud where that data is at rest in a data center in, I don't know, Canada or Australia or something, and is being maintained by support workers there, and the data itself is not protected by any kind of encryption or anything like that. Like, that's one extreme scenario, right, that you probably wouldn't do, but that's like one extreme scenario. And then think of the example that there is data that is at rest within the European Union that is actually encrypted with a key that only the customer has access to, yet in a crisis scenario, a support person from, you know, New Zealand could access a server that data is, you know, at rest. You know, these are actually very extreme, different scenarios from a true risk perspective. But whenever you try to translate what the technical, you know, what the legislation says into a technical context, where do you fall? You know, there's a lot of interpretation that we're still trying to figure out what it means. And we will only truly understand that, I think, in the coming years and probably the next several years, and there will always need to be basically clarifying court cases that will have to be handled by the European courts that will lead to new conclusions that will guide us. So the point is that you're building cloud solutions on a target that is moving. And so whenever you work in a world where you don't know what will happen in the coming years, but you know that your solution will need to live for a number of years, you need to prepare yourself for, how will you deal with the scenario of changing interpretation of legislation or even changing legislation. I mean, everyone working here in Europe, right? We know when GDPR came into play. We know that Schrems 2 came, for example, and caused a huge new dialogue because the privacy shield between the European Union and the United States, where most of the big three, public cloud vendors are all based out of the U.S., that was found invalid. That has forced all of the big cloud vendors to answer a lot of questions about how they handle data, but also forced all of us as creators and providers of cloud solutions to have dialogues with our partners on how do we react to this and how do we secure that we're best protecting the integrity of the data of our users and our customers at the end of the day. And now, of course, we have a new framework that is coming in place, and we expect an adequacy decision fairly soon. So this is just one iteration, however, right? And then this will continue happening over the coming years. So you can also, in certain industries, for example, in like digital banking, European banking regulations require that you at least can document what is your exit strategy from your current provider, right? It's about being responsible, and it's about future-proofing both your solutions and also your business. So way back to the beginning, right? I talked about that smart use of technology and smart development and solution delivery is about understanding how can I kind of future-proof to be able to adapt my solutions to the world that I live in. I think actually, not necessarily being purely cloud agnostic. I mean, there's nothing that's completely black and white, but you need to always understand at any given point in time what is the impact that I have of making this particular decision. How would it impact my ability to change from one cloud provider to another? Or if I have the same solution I want to deliver to different users that have different expectations about how I'm delivering that to them. So we have, of course, in KMD, a number of solutions where we might prefer to have it in public cloud, but we have certain customers that might expect something different, right? So from a development and maintenance and delivery perspective, we need to be able to handle that as well. So it starts by talking a bit about regulations, but it's much more about, I think, being able to adapt to this changing world. The other thing that I want to talk a bit about is that all cloud workloads are not created equal. So it's also kind of a bit funny anecdote for me. When I came to KMD, right, I came from, as I said in the beginning, from being in the game industry in a very innovative kind of market-leading company to a company that was in these very highly regulated and in many cases very slow-moving sectors, right? So I came to KMD and people were talking I came to KMD in 2020 and people are talking about cloud being new, and it took me a while I was like, guys, it's 10 years old. What are we talking about cloud being new, right? But even and then it was because I realized, okay, yeah, but it is actually new in the context of what we work in. But even now, we have a lot of experience actually with cloud solutions, how we build them, how we run them, and how to optimize them. And we can understand as well that from a maintenance perspective, and especially from a cost and compute perspective, they're not all created equal. So this is also, I think, why sort of the multi-cloud world we live in is actually an opportunity, because if you want to also run a good business and have the best, be able to best manage your compute cost, then lean into this, right? there's no reason. One good example, for example, is that you might want to deliver a solution that uses a lot of AI and machine learning in a public cloud because that gives you the best, delivery, like maintenance. It gives you the best, like you can do all of your DevOps stuff. Like it's the best from a maintenance perspective, from a delivery perspective. You can deliver the best quality, the best SLAs. But you find that perhaps doing all of the data processing to actually train and develop the models is extremely expensive in public cloud because it's pure compute, right? Like, but we live in a hybrid or in a multi-cloud world, right? So like, why not train your models on a private cloud somewhere where it's very, very cheap, and then actually deliver the customer solution in a public cloud where the user experience and also the maintenance and delivery experience for you is the best. So see it, I think, as an opportunity. So the kind of key conclusion on this one, and as I said, I ended with this one because I think this is the one that is a bit controversial in some people's mind. But I really believe that future-proofing your product and your business means embracing cloud-agnostic tooling and DevOps practices. That's the key takeaway. And you can say that you don't believe in multi-cloud. I think I've kind of pointed out that's like saying that you don't believe in gravity, but like all of the other things, it's your choice and how much you decide to lean into this or not. So that was just a tour that I've tried to take you through each one of the key technology trends that we've identified in our map here. We have also just published our map on the KMD website. I believe that it's live today or very soon, where you can actually go in and look at each one of the technologies in more detail. I needed to try to keep it also high level to fit within the amount of time, so I didn't have time to dive into a number of these particular technologies, but I will say I mentioned that we in the CTO office have a lot of focus and actually doing work with fireware technology. We're very interested in digital twins. Actually, we have been a driver with some of our businesses to actually start creating new business and new solutions with some of the municipalities in Denmark on this. I'm personally also very, very interested, of course, as I mentioned, in the multi-cloud future in general and how to prepare as an organization for that, how to leverage that as an opportunity. And then I'm also actually personally very interested in quantum computing in the context of security. So there's a lot of people who are very excited about quantum computing in general and how to commercialize it. I actually think that the first thing that we need to be prepared for is how to secure that solutions are quantum secure. So that's just a little bit of insight into what I find interesting. And I hope I was able to give at least a high-level tour around the map, and I hope that you will take a look at it on KMD's website later. Look into some more of the technologies, and as I said, we in the CTO office expect to publish more communication and follow-ups on a number of these different trends, and even some of the technologies that we're working with. So yes, that is it, and I thank you all for sitting through almost an hour of me talking about this. So yeah, thank you.